Ready? Aim!
There's too many!
Anyone see my mammoth?
Stubby! Hello! Hello. We're back for another week. I'm super blurry. That's going to be really handy for all the ridiculously expressive facial emotions I'm going to have today. Thus, you won't be able to see what kind of crazy, disappointed facial expressions I will be pulling, such as this famous one, or this less obscene one. Yes. Right. Anyway, it's another week. You can tell I've probably gone insane. It's been a good week. It's been a good week for me. Definitely not related to Song of Ice and Fire whatsoever, but related to workplaces and real world. So that's good stuff there. But as a result, Song has been on a bit of a back burner. I've been doing some kind of like thinking about some stuff, and lots of people contacted me from last week, which is great. And yeah, just lots of things kind of like hopefully going to be planned, but also incredibly busy for me in the coming weeks with work. So that's going to be fun. Good news. It's good news for work, but yeah, not something you want in the middle of well, I say thankfully, not in the middle of and if this was at the middle of a new patch, it would be an absolute nightmare. But it's not a new patch, right? It's the end of an old patch, so it's a good time to happen in that regard. But yes, anyway, on with it, as they say. So yes, Scar says Carlo's still banished. Carlo's not banished. Carlo is welcome back at any time he so desires. He just doesn't desire at the moment, and that's absolutely fine. You know, I spoke about it last week, but I think a lot of people are currently tired, and I'll be super honest today, guys. I have some ideas for content and stuff and some things I want to do, but today I really didn't feel like doing an episode. Not because I don't want to do episodes, not because I don't want to talk about the game, but ultimately it's because I think, you know, for a lot of the game, for me, there isn't really anything left to discuss, right? There are things left to discuss. You know, there are things to think about, things to do, things to, you know, you can still play the game, but for me, there's very little to actually discuss about the game in terms of like new adventures or kind of cubby holes and things to go down the route of. Still haven't done all my badges, you know, which is my current kind of like target is doing all the badges up to. Well, I've done all the normal commanders. I still have to do neutral commanders. So that's still on the back burner as something I need to get finished off before the new patch, ideally. You know, finishing off the collect them all. But I just, like I said last week, I cannot stand playing Ramsey in things outside neutrals. And I realized last week I said I can't stand playing Ramsey. The context there is outside neutrals. Ramsey in neutrals, fine. You know, Roos neutrals, fine. But Roos in other factions, kind of still fun. Ramsey in other factions, just not fun. Not fun. Don't enjoy Ramsey in other factions. But yes, there will be things. There will be things. Frozen Shore Hunters didn't make the release date cut, so no need to worry about Free Folk at LVO. I'm fairly sure you should still worry about Free Folk at LVO, Carl. Frozen Shore Hunters definitely wouldn't have made any difference, in my opinion, to their potential success rate. Marwin says there's nothing to discuss about the game but the lore. Yes, lots of lore, Marwin. More lore. We should do more lore. The thing is, I would do a lore episode, but my lore extent is, you know, a quick search on a Wikipedia page on my other monitor, which you guys definitely can't see, so that's really handy. But no, but my lore is old because it's been since I was at uni since I last read the books properly, and I've kind of read bits of them since then and things like that. Yeah, no, I haven't. I'm way behind on lore. and I don't have the memory that other people do. Yes. Okay. Uh, R'hllor episode, more R'hllor. Yes, do a lore episode, but make it entirely about flaming people, because that's R'hllor. Right. Anyway, so I have a plan today, and there's lots of things that we are going to cover. We will get to tournaments later on, because Spanish lists have been locked and revealed. In case you didn't know, the Spanish team tournament running this weekend. Lists are locked, lists are public. You can go and view those now. We will be viewing them later on. The faction breakdown is a bit different to what you might expect, but it's on a par with what you'd expect. It's not crazy, but it is a bit different. So there's a positive thing there, and ironically, not the direction I would have gone in certainly one regard, which is kind of crazy. What else we got? We've got. I know that I've been asked by Willie Bunks on Discord to talk about Captain Co. So we'll stop by there. Captain Con happening this weekend, as well as, or 2 weekends away. Not this weekend. LVO and the big Spanish team tournament this weekend, followed by Captain Con weekend after. So we'll talk about that later on as well. And yeah, so today's main plan. In case people didn't know, right, there is something that people might not have known, and I'll cover it. It is news, so this is kind of like the self-appointed job that I supposedly do for the community. Who does that, right? Night models. If those of you who don't know what night models are the same guys who produced the Batman game, the Batman miniatures game. They have picked up as 15 years into this is their 15th year in existence, if you will. They have actually picked up rights to something that we are all here gathered today about, and that is rights specifically from the Game of Thrones and House of the Dragons TV show. Is the TV show rights. So we believe that if you've never seen the Batman miniatures game, I will bring some stuff up for it. It's not the 28 heroic or kind of 30 mil heroic, whatever you want to call it, whatever the game Song of Ice and Fire is supposed to be, because I swear it's meant to be 28 mil or 30 mil or heroic 28, heroic 30, 32, some people say. But the Batman miniatures game, it comes at slightly larger. Let's get up the Night Models website, show you some of the stuff that they have going on over here. They also do like they're a IP purchaser. They've got things like Harry Potter as well, you see. But yeah, so just an example. There you go. Ooh, look at that guy, the crazy Joker guy. Crazy Joker guy. That makes me sound like I literally know nothing about DC and Batman. But yeah, they are slightly larger. I couldn't remember off the top of my head. Wow, this is what you get for slow internet when you're streaming. But I couldn't tell you the exact scale. But yeah, really, really interesting and good models. So yeah, Evan says it's an existing relationship with Warner Brothers and Discovery. Yeah, they just kind of like pushed it further for that. So yeah, they just kind of bought into, but it'd be the TV show. So this is actually quite important. It's the TV show that they're basing the miniatures off, and it will be, if it's anything like what we saw in the Batman games and things like that, it's a miniatures game, but it's not a war game. I think that's what people talk about. It's not going to be a strategy game in that sense. It's going to be a game of predominantly talking, skirmish, single characters, MCP style. Yes, MCP, yeah, MCP style miniatures game. So yeah, do check out the Batman game. I mean, I've not played the Batman game. We have someone in our group who recommends it. I can't say myself I've ever played it. I can't recommend it to anybody. But yeah, it's there. Let's have a nice look at Batman. Ooh. Look at that. Ooh, some of these models are actually quite nice. All the fancy Batmans. So there you go. Nice. The base is a 40 mil, so I think the scale is going to be, that's a 40 mil base. You're talking about 50 mil, 40 to 50 mil miniature is the standard size they're going for. So they are bigger. They would look out of place on a Song of Ice and Fire board. But yeah. Okay, cool. Matthew, excited but still waiting on Brazen Beasts. Yeah, Brazen Beasts. No more news on that, I'm afraid. At least none that I've seen. And yes, probably rules out a House of Dragon era expansion for Song of Ice and Fire from Simon. Yes, most likely. Now they still have the book rights for the game. For the Dark Sword have the book rights, and given that that is, and they do work directly with J.R.R. Martin. So given that, it's not actually House of the Dragon completely unruled, but yeah, they can base it, as Evan says, they can base it on the books. Your problem here is that Night Models have obviously taken this and gone, right, guys, we're announcing this, we're going to roll with it. The problem is, as we know, Simon, as Long as Fire, is slow, it's difficult, they aren't communicative. It's unlikely we're going to see anything come out from Simon on that front. I think it's not ruling out the possibility of House of Dragon era part of the game, but I don't think the developers are looking to push it in that direction initially. So yeah. Duncan Egg skirmish game is what we all actually want, even if we don't realize it. Yes, the Duncan Egg skirmish game. Yeah. Bobby B Rebellion. I think in my head that'd be pretty boring because there's only really two factions. You're either the good guys or the bad guys. The bad guys being the rebellion, the good guys being the loyalists, or the good guys Bobby B and the rebellion, and the bad guys the loyalist. Is it Lannister versus Baratheon plus allies? Is it Targaryen versus Targaryen / Lannister versus Baratheon / Stark / allies everywhere? Shock and horror. Give me the awe. I don't know. Anyway, so that will be that's the first piece of news that those of you may or may not be aware of. So the second piece of news is barely news, but hey, it's a slow news year. So I'll give you this one. This was no one's seen this. Yes, this is Mikkel. Mikkel. He literally messaged a Song of Ice and Fire page on Facebook. And he said his name's Mikkel, big fan, player game, planning big tournament event for this month, February and March, and we'd like to know if there's some balance patch update coming soon. People are stuck right now and losing interest about the game, and the feedback between community and game is terrible. Thanks. And he did get a response later that day. Admittedly, we are talking, it's effectively 10 hours later. You've got to take into account time zone differences there, so this is not significantly an issue. This is still like within the bounds of a response. In a timely period, and I wouldn't say it's the most timely, but with a that's not a problem. That's what I mean. Hi Mikkel, we'll probably have a balance patch coming soon, but it's not likely it will hit before your tournament if it's in February. The designers will soon talk about that. The designers will soon talk about that. Cool. Anyway, that's that. Nobody knows what that means. That is just I'm soon going to talk about making that tournament video, that how to do a tournament on stats. That's an old meme. If you're newer here, that is an old meme. Yeah. Soon TM is the moment we have to really think about. This could mean that they're going to talk about the balance patch in 2028. I don't think it'll be that long. I hope it isn't that long. The game will be dead if there is not a balance patch between now and 2028. But yeah. Imperial social media intern overshared. He has been banished and he has lost his school credit. Yes, he is. He's dead now. Yeah. No. Anyway, cool. So, let's. Oh, I've gone insane. Can you tell? Dramatic pauses and things like this. It's unlike all TG content you've ever seen before. So, let's actually get into the meat and potatoes of today, which is going to be deployment. Now, I am going to sit here and tell you that I have prepared some lists and prepared some fantastic examples to show you guys the impact or the effect of deployment in games. And I'm going to do this with lists that I think are kind of good to use as examples of lists that you need to think about when it comes to deploying, right? There are a couple of hard and fast rules first of all. So I am going to use a Mance list as my opponent's list. I am going to use a Mance list as the opponent's list because it emulates what I need it to emulate within this scenario. However, we are going to look at different lists, and I will change up the opponent's lists. Okay. Now I'm going to be talking about this from both perspectives, and I will hasten to add everything here is my own opinion. Okay, so just take that into account. Okay. More on that later. So the first list I was going to show you guys is a Kevin, what we might call meta list. It's nothing surprising. It's Kevin and crossbowmen. It's 8 activations. We've got the Gregor. We've got Lannister. We've got Lannister guards. We've got Poor Fellows. Three NCUs. This is a standard what we call 8 activation list. We have ranged units, which this one ranged unit with quite high kind of aggressiveness / priority / anger. Whatever you want to call it, it's a unit you want to put resources into in the Kevin Crossbowman. We've got a unit of cavalry. Yes, we've got a unit of flayed men that's going to act as our kind of like wrecking ball cavalry. We've got a unit of defensive infantry in the guardsmen. We've got Poor Fellows, who are a utility infantry unit, simple utility coming in at 5 with the attachment point there, and then the Gregor at 4 as like a solo. Yeah, this is not uncommon as an 8 activation list. Starks might be looking at cavalry, probably not Stark bowmen. They might be going double she bears or something like that. So you've got Tully Cav, she bears, and then you're going to be looking at perhaps maybe Cranigman, and then you're going to be looking at Wolf, probably Shaggy. And the trade out there is that Starks aren't going to be running necessarily any ranged units. They might put in the Cranigman, as I say, unlikely to put the Bowman in, unlikely to go for Stormcrow Archers as well. So there's our kind of like Stark variation of the 8 activation, which I'm not going to show you the Stark version, but I might if I have time or if I want to, or yeah, whatever. We'll see. So let us load this into a game, right? So while I quickly prepare this behind the scenes, this is, as I say, going to be running up against a Mance list, right? The classic Mance list. And the reason I want to show it to you in regards to deploying a Mance list is it kind of shows you the strength of Mance, but more so than just that, it shows you the impact that deployment can have on a game. So where's... I'm trying to make sure I've got the... I'm pretty sure this one's right. It'll do. Yeah, that's the right one. Oh. Yeah. No, that's not the right one. This is what happens if you make subtle changes on activation lists and things all the time. There we go. Nice. No, stupid me, actually forgot to get it from the thing. So yes, this is a classic 10 activation Mance list that you've seen me and heard me talk about, seen me run plenty of times before, acting as the opponent in this case. Now I'm going to talk about deployment here. I'm not going to talk about terrain whatsoever initially. Well, maybe I'm not. Hey, we'll mix it up, right? The thing is with terrain will impact your decision making, right? Terrain will impact a lot of your decision making when it comes to deployment. So, with that in mind, there is something I need to tell you, right? This is quite important. Make sure you get it right first time. Anyway, cool. So, let's jump into this then. So, standard 8 versus a 10 activation. Your opponent massively outdeploys you. Now, I'll be super honest. If you're a free folk player, you know what your first 2 deployments probably going to be, and I always know what they're going to be. It's going to be this here and this here, with enough room in front of it for units. Again, I'm only just doing this very roughly to show you quickly how this works. I know that's going to happen before the game even starts, so I might as well put those on the board before it starts. You probably know that's going to happen as well. So, with that in mind, this is actually quite important. Your opponent has what we call dead drops. Drops in your list that don't reveal any information. You do not have dead drops. Okay, you are out-activated, and every drop you have is going to reveal some information to your opponent. So, we can't win this stage of the game. Not really. At least not internally. I'm going to just change the map. I can't stand the crowded map. I prefer the green. Keep it nice and simple, much easier to see on. So, we can't win this stage of the game by traditional means. I cannot realistically out-deploy my opponent. So what I have to do is I have to think about my deployment objectives and my deployment goals. This changes massively in different scenarios against different lists where activations are equal, who goes first, who goes second, what terrain gets deployed, all of these things. All of these things change how you deploy, okay? But remember the golden rule. Cool. So, let's go. Let's go. Hilariously, most people say no audio when I go big. That's actually quite funny, which means you've missed out on all of the perfect knowledge that I've imparted to you. Oh, you cannot make this stuff up. Maybe you'll find out in a secret later episode. Find out later on the next episode of Mickey Goes Insane. Yes. Cool. Right, so with that in mind, we know that activating a deployment is not going to go well. Okay? We know from the offset that we are not going to win the deployment phase. With that in mind, we just have to attempt to think, how do we actually go ahead and win this phase of the game? So, the first thing we have to think about is we know we've got no dead drops. Right? There's nothing that we do can reveal information. So what we have to do is reveal the obvious information first. Okay? Now, what do I mean when I say obvious information? Well, that's where things kind of get a bit difficult. Because in truth, the only obvious information that we can ever enter or give is the stuff that we expect people to know about. Okay? So, let's actually dive in, and we will kind of do this here. So, I don't know. He's deployed a chariot. Whatever. He's deployed first or second. There is actually an important one here as well, and I will mention terrain quickly before I reveal the secret stuff that I've been talking mentally about when I go full screen. Terrain in this instance is important. When you are massively out-activated, like I said before, you cannot win the deployment phase. With that in mind, play for a skewed board. Okay? That's my opinion. Play for a skewed board. Right? If you lose the roll off, you have to play into the skewed board. At least you get first turn choice. That has power. The reason else you want to play into a skewed board is if you win that roll off, you can actually go away and win deployment by choosing side. Which I know a lot of people think, oh, but then I'm going to give the player first turn choice. Who gives a shit? At this point, you're not winning the game doing these other things. So do the things that allow you the best opportunity at winning. So have a skewed board. Don't be afraid to go, you know what, let's say there's a forest here, there's a classic, like, I don't know, there's normally a weirwood near the middle, isn't there? Free folk like to deploy a bog, so let's just put a bog somewhere, like here as well. And then you'll be like, haha, I am going to put, I don't know, what can we put down? Where's a palisade? There we go. Splat. And your opponent's like, oh, hang on, crap. There's now a palisade, especially in the middle of the board. Really counters a manse list. It means they have to split something here, it pulls things out of the manse bubble. You know, or they walk up to it and they have to attack it. And walking up to it and attacking it removes tempo, removes time. Like, all of these things are just things you can do to annoy your opponent. And I'm not going to sit here and say they make it more difficult for your opponent and your opponent won't know what to do. Your opponent will know what to do if they're very good. They'll have solutions. They'll, you know, I see this kind of thing all the time in games where I kind of like mock play or have to think about how I play. Not enough people do it. So many people deploy terrain in their own ways and think, that's going to screw me. And I'm like, yeah, that's going to screw me, but who cares? I'm a big fan of like uneven deployment sides. Because you can't win the deployment phase. You actually can't win the deployment phase in itself. So make winning the 50-50 dice roll really good for you if you win it. And if you lose it, it didn't get worse for you because you've already lost the deployment phase. I know, bad logic. People will hate me for that. Let's see where we're at in chat before I reveal some of the secret things. Psychological drama, yes. Isn't this extremely terrain dependent? It is Ariakas, but then there's the super secret information that I'm going to tell you, which I will get to later on. Okay, I will get to. So, 2 dead drops. Finally, after all that knowledge, we're going to deploy a unit. And my first unit is going to have to be a choice. I've got 2 units. I've got 2 units, and I've got this third. Solos, first of all. Gregor is a sad solo. Varamir is a kind of sad solo. Let's move him slightly up the sadness list. And Chariots are happy solos. What do I mean by this? Gregor has this little thing on his movement stat card that says 4. This makes me sad. Look at slow Gregor. 4. 4 makes Gregor a sad solo. Varamir has movement 4. That makes him a sad solo. But he gets the eagle and he's in free folk, so that makes him a happy solo. So he's mildly not sad. He's a slightly sad solo. Chariots are movement 6. They are happy solos. Stark Wolves are movement 6. They're happy solos. Who cares about solos that move 5 without infantry? Drowned Men. Drowned Men are super sad solos because they're infantry at movement 5. And Freed Men are super sad solos because they're infantry at movement 5. They're barely solos. They're just literally small infantry trays. Think of them as infantry trays in every single way that you know them as infantry trays. Like this. They're just smaller. Whereas this is not an infantry tray. Very important. So, sad solos and happy solos. Sad solos, they don't have high movement. Not having high movement means they can't respond. Part of the reason happy solos get to do this at the start of the game is on round 1, this unit can travel 18 inches with no modifiers. Right? 18 inches will take this to the side of the board. 18 inches will take this to the side of the board. The board is only 48 inches long. If you've got one in the middle, that's 24 inches from the center of your base to the edge. You don't really need to be right at the edge. I mean, that would be nuts because you'd be off the board because it's the center of your base. So you actually got an inch in from that anyway because it's the center of your base, and then another inch in because that's the edge of your base. So something like about here. And then you don't really need to be 2 inches from the edge of the board. You can probably afford to be about 6 inches, 7 inches, 8 inches. You know, conservative play 9, 10 inches in, which is about here. So hang on, that happy solo with 18 inches, easily bypassing that line of care. So, a happy solo deployed right in the middle of the back, just like we see Gregor here. He can go over here, or over here on round 1, or even just huddle up and you can use him on round 2 to reposition. He is a happy guy. Gregor is not a happy guy, because he only moves 12, right? Now 12 is still enough, you know, 12 is still enough to get significantly further forward and still be in a good position, but hang on, you're less than 12 inches into the board now. Like, bearing in mind you probably deployed behind something. It's not great. And if he's here, he's probably going to get caught in traffic jams of the things in front of him. Oh, God. This guy is not happy. You see? This is why we call him a sad solo. Hopefully, you're all following me so far. Ilya says mammoths. Yeah, mammoths are just infantry, but... Well, mammoths and giants are just infantry, but, you know, not infantry. So, sad solos. I am of the opinion you do not want to deploy a sad solo first. These guys are incredibly vulnerable to certain things in the game, while also being incredibly threatening to other things in the game. Solos in general are not bad. You know, Jorah is a side example. Jorah is a fast solo, so he's a happy solo. He's incredibly vulnerable, but it doesn't matter, because deploying him here, he don't care. That's exactly where he wants to be at the start of the game. Who cares? Gregor, putting him here, he's a sad Gregor. He is not riding. He is the mountain that walks, the mountain that runs slightly quickly, the mountain that ambles. He is not the mountain that rides like a beast on the wind. Right? We want mountain that rides somewhere impactful. So does this get deployed first? No. That was a long decision tree and a lot of me warbling to make that decision. Okay? So that moves us into a choice. We've got our 2 impact units, our support unit, and our kind of like infantry block. Okay, we can kind of think of this as a support unit as well. And this is again a standard kind of 8 activation style list. In my head, your first thing should be to look at your infantry blocks and say it's movement 4. This thing won't get much chance to navigate around the field. Okay, if you put it here on this side of the board, by the time you've marched up, perhaps inside, that's round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5, you can probably just about reach this corner, assuming nothing in your way and marching at full pelt each turn. 8, then another 8, let's say you come in a little bit, then another 8, that's 3. I'm giving him a bit of a bonus here for angles and stuff, 4, 5, and let's say he goes for a 10-inch charge. Yeah, he'd probably be able to hit an objective just over here. That's a sad guardsman. He cannot get easily up the field this way and then convert and have to loop round to come into this flank. Not easily. The game is probably already over at that point. So as a result, if you are putting a 4 movement or a 4-inch movement infantry unit on the flank, I'm going to turn to free folk now. What do I see when you do that? I see a guardsman unit that does not really have any impact on the game outside of this box. If I'm not in this box, that guardsman unit isn't in play. Not unless you invest resources in moving it and other things, okay? Now, as the free folk player, this has revealed information. This has revealed important information that I do care about. However, you still have all these left. This is not information that I can do a huge amount with. I'm going to let this one slide. Now, I'm of the opinion that you should never deploy anything wholly within those 12 inches of the edge of the board when you've got an 8 activation list early. Because you are never in your right mind going to deploy this here. It sidelines the unit too much, too easy to make it play no part in the game. And as a result, you're now saying you're playing with the remaining 36 inches of the board. Yeah? This, never a good position for a slow infantry block as a first deployment. And people will go, oh, but Mickey, you're wrong, because what happens if we have a 5 objective game mode come out? And I go, cool. So your guardsmen are just going to take this objective. Fantastic. So either I decide, can I beat your remaining 4 combat units on that part of the board? Or do I just go and kill the guardsmen and take that part of the board? Thus, this deployment drop tells me information way earlier than you think, and is already informing my decision making. Okay, personally, go for the middle. Go for the middle with an early deployment drop. Just like the free folk player, go for it in the middle. Don't be afraid to drop in the cavalry. Don't be afraid to drop in the guardsmen. If you think, I'm going to want to hold the center objective in this game mode, I am going to put my hardest hitting unit in the middle of the board, or my hardest defensive unit in the middle of the board, to make him have to fight me. This unit does jack poo when it's over here. This unit does something when it's here. It does something when it's here. It does something when it's there. It does something when it's here. It does something when it's in the middle of the board. It does bugger all when it's over here going, haha, 1 VP per round, which so many people do. Right. Marvin says, I don't like this episode. I feel my ELO increasing. I know, right? I'm sorry, Marvin. People, if you don't like this kind of stuff, just tell me. So, Guardsmen, I would deploy either center or off center at most here, right? But I can't get to this. Yes, you can, right? Just move 4 inches to here on round 1. You know, you might want to go a bit further across, and then you move your 8 inches forward. Yeah, you might need to go a little bit further across. So you might go up to the 12-inch line, perhaps. So about here. Let's get the angles right. There's 4. And then there you go. You still got there, but you deployed here to do it. Okay? Oh, but I don't get it on round 1. It doesn't matter on round 1. The objectives don't score. Who cares? It's not important. Okay? So this is a much better deployment drop of a guardsman unit than anything like this. Okay? In my opinion. And vice versa. Utility units like this with long AoE arcs, you're going to want to deploy this in similar kind of fashion, where the AoE, the closer towards the middle, effectively the bigger the AoE. Here, it's a 12-inch AoE, so now it's anything past that line could be affected. Now, this is a movement 5 infantry unit, so it has got a bit more scope to come in and play around in the rest of the board. But ultimately, if this is deployed there, that's a Warcry range, unless I do something about that in gameplay. So realistically, I want it here, where I'm now talking about Warcrying anywhere up to here, and of course to the edge of the board. Pretty much, you know, nothing's going to be right on the edge. So don't be afraid to do something a little bit like that. Same logic applies. 5 forward. Let's go 5 offset slightly to about there with a pivot. And then 10 ahead, easily covering that objective with room to spare. Okay? So if you want to spread out, you can, but also nothing is revealed. Now you're probably thinking, oh, but Mickey, you've only got space for 2 units in there. Yeah, and I've only got 2 units in a solo left. How hard is it? So, at some point, let's say, so what's you normally deploy raiders in the middle. There's a classic 3rd deployment drop from the free folk player. I know what they're likely to do, but again, the free folk player's done nothing. This is the classic. This can be the linchpin of the line. It can be near the center, but Mance can expand this way and have the bubble here, expanding out, or it could be here, expanding out, or you go here or here, expanding out here and here. Like, I again know nothing about the free folks' plan whatsoever from their deployment, so I can't really respond to my opponent. And this is, remember, what scenario 1 is. Scenario 1 is I cannot respond to my opponent. So what's the best way I can think about this? So now, flayed men and crossbowmen are going to be impacting here. What would I do? Personally, I drop the flayed men next. The flayed men are cavalry. They can respond much better than the crossbowmen can to any deployment drops next. And this is where we finally get it. The free folk now have to commit something within their arsenal to showing us a piece of information. Now, if I were them, I would probably decide which side of the board I want to play on. I quite like this bog. I like your killing these guys over killing the guardsmen. So I would probably deploy Mance on this flank here, somewhere like that. Or it would be the trappers here, or the champion of bone unit there. Something a little bit like that is what the free folk player is likely to be going to go for. variation in where those units will be. I would expect them to deploy the trappers next. Yeah. Okay. There's piece of information one that is any real use to us. We know that this is going to be happening. We can deploy Kevin this side as an impact unit. Okay. If Mance decides to go this way, then we're happy with that. We're absolutely happy with that because what we can force to do is we can force to play a split game like so. Yeah, we can absolutely be happy with this. Be more aggressive with the guardsmen in an attempt to make the aggressive line this way. So again, thinking about the actual game board, that is kind of projected area of the free folk control versus Lannister control. In the way I would think I want to play the game. That's fine. What you've actually done here with the Kevin drop is deny this from the free folk player. Okay? This is what you've done. This is what you've achieved. Now, does it really deny it? Is there lots of value having these discussions? But at the end of the day, this is what we're talking about in this scenario. That gives you Gregor to drop in the gap there as your final deployment. Vice versa, if I think he's going to deploy with this drop, if I think he's going to deploy this way still, so let's say if he deploys this here, and I am now convinced that Mance is going to deploy this way, I still have the option to put in Kevin to contest the middle here. Yeah? And given that I know that Mance is going to deploy this way, it allows me, let's say they drop that there, or that would be Mance actually. Let's say that I feel that I want to take the fight with my slow solo. Now they're always going to use their slow solo last for the exact same reason that I'm using mine to last. It's the kind of like it's not the hardest thing, but it's the hardest thing to get caught in traffic that can't respond to drops. Whereas infantry can kind of respond to drops because they're bigger. So that themselves gives them a wider arc and a wider range and just more input in the game. And they also have to be dealt with more because they don't, they do relatively more damage than solos do. Relatively. So this would, in this case, tell me that the mountain needs to be deployed here, willing to take a face-on threat here, or I shy away from that and I decide to put the mountain over here, right? Those are my two options. Of course, if I put him here, I am willingly deciding that the mountain from this deployment zone is going to come at least, at best, I should say, on round 1 to here, outside of special resources being invested, and then a further 12 this way. Yeah, that's 2 rounds of movement, and he's finally over to this side of the board. So me deploying him here is actually saying, if I wanted him over here, and if I desperately need him over here, he's not in the game till round 3. If he's not in the game till round 3, you're playing an activation down and abilities down. That might as well have just been a unit of poor fellows. It's garbage. It's done nothing. Okay? Just bear that one in mind. Your mileage may vary. So Mance will just questions in chat. What about deploying in depth, says Belisarius. Yes, you can deploy in depth. There is nothing wrong with deploying in depth. Of course, this is talking about 10-inch deployment scenarios. Deploying in depth like here is not a problem, but like I said, sad solos are sad, and deploying units like this is dumb and you're an idiot. Mainly because, genuinely, if people want to know why, it lowers your threshold footprint, right? Your units, if you deploy like this, okay, this is actually a genuine thing, because I see people do this in Mance all the time, and they're idiots as well. This. Let's say this is a formation. I'm not saying this is a good one. What part of the board do you actually control? Because you don't control any of this, or any of that. So at the moment, you're winning 1 objective to my 4. And I can respond to this kind of deployment because you're going to be dropping one of those at round 2 or round 3. Easy counters in the deployment there. So far too much telegraphing, far too much of an issue. You want to leave the deployment phase with options, and putting units behind other units limits your options because you're now beholden to the unit in front of you. For example, having to move first. Those of you who aren't aware, let's just get this guy out. If he's to march 10, he has to be right up against the back of that cavalry in order to march over the top. And then he's incredibly limited by his pivot arc. See, look? Any more than that, and I can't pivot. And I can't pivot the other way. Look, I've already pushed the Flame Men back a load. So I'm actually very limited in my movement. I have created a traffic jam without necessarily creating a jam directly. Okay, so that answers Belisarius' question. How does this align with the law is the real question. Good one. Carl, guards on the side with the intent of going forwards to the second marker on the side. Yes, you could do that. You could deploy guards on the side with the intent of going forwards to the second marker. Yes, this unit over here, going over here. The problem you've got is that this isn't a threat unit. Okay? So what I mean by that is that this isn't a damage dealing unit. This is going to move 8 forward. Right? So let's just do this directly. 8. Hey. Then we're going to go 8 again. Hey, I'm coming. I'm coming. And then you might charge me on round 3. Ha-ha! I'm engaged. By this point, I've come forward a couple of inches. I'm now basically an inch away from you. And you charge me and go, ha-ha! You're now engaged. And I go, cool. Your unit has 6 dice. It cannot kill me. It is a 0 threat. So, I will take 6 wounds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a failed panic test with 3 foot raiders, and sod it, hear me roar, for another 5 wounds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I go, oh no, you nearly killed my unit. And this is bearing in mind you did maximum damage. We're not talking about the OP of free folk here. If this is Stark Sworn Swords, you're not doing this much damage. And I go, whoop. So on round 2 I scored points, and on round 3 I've scored points. Cool. I'm winning. Yes, you've now got a much healthier unit than I have. But I can always back off more. If I really don't want to score the point, if I want to force you to come be more aggressive. And bearing in mind, if you're being very aggressive here, putting resources into this unit, being aggressive here, have I not got resources here that are going to help out? Or are we assuming a one-on-one matchup across the board? If you're assuming a one-on-one matchup across the board, well, the person who wins is the person who's got the better list, and the person who puts the most resources into a said fight, generally speaking. So, there's that. Not necessarily wrong, but certainly something that I agree it needs to be thought about. It's not as simple as just marching forward. So Mance would just deploy Varamir, though don't you have to commit crossbows before Mance anyway? Yes, Ilya. In this case, you could have to deploy the crossbowmen before Mance, kind of regardless. This is actually the point. The crossbowmen have to be deployed before Mance in this scenario, nearly every single time, because you can't respond. What you're doing is you're responding to where you think he might be, but also where you want to project threat. Like the Kevin deployment on this side of the board is not really about saying I'm going to counter Mance, but it's now saying I want you to deploy over here now. I want you to be on this side of the board. Because then I can be very aggressive with my crossbowmen, especially with Kevin crossbowmen. They are an aggressive piece, especially off crowns and off horses and off general movement shenanigans. Be very aggressive up the board, and provide a defensive unit as well in terms of Kevin's Lancer Supremacy and Wealth of the Rock. Okay, so this projection here, all of a sudden, this linchpin unit on the flank or an extra raider unit, let's bring an extra raider unit, this is going to have to come and tie you up, and this unit's going to have to kind of not just let you shoot him in the flank, so he's probably going to want to have to turn, and this gives options, right? Because now, let's say the battle evolves, we've got something a bit like this. You got this here and this here. And let's just restore them back to full health. For the sake of argument, no melees have broken out, right? But actually, these units, we won't commit these 3 over here. That's a different story altogether. Free folk OP. But the point is at the moment, the actual center of force of this particular game is the free folk player coming this way. Oh, sorry, the Lancer player coming this way, and the free folk player coming this way. And this will create a wheeled structure, a little bit like I said here. At the very start, I drew these lines out, and that's exactly what it creates. And the Lannister player will push in and look to create this zone here as a death zone, this zone here as a death zone, and the free folk player, let's change it up for the free folk, go to red. The free folk player wants this area here to be the main death zone, and to some extent, with the chariots and things, this area here. Right? This is where the fighting is going to take place. It's also elements like here, you have to pull in units to shore up the line, otherwise you're going to start getting flanks and stuff like this. Opens up to other things going on. Like, there's options. I'm not saying it's going to be a win for the Lancer player by any stretch, but my point is there's a game plan, and with a game plan you can make holes and you can make people think and you can make people lose. So yeah. Do you think any of the last units should even try to hold either right side objectives? Just push the middle with everything if free for play goes on the left side. Yeah, I mean, again, this is free folk from a deployment perspective, not an actual gameplay perspective, because of course free folk can just reach out and blow up some of these units in one go if they really want to, and then to put it bluntly, you're just into a really difficult game. Then I can't pretend that this is a good scenario for the Lancer player who's going to have a great time and is going to absolutely enjoy the game. They're not, right? But from the deployment perspective, you can think about this as kind of like how I would see the game evolve. Okay, cool. So that's what you do, or at least that's what I think about when I am out-activated massively, and how I have to think about deployment, where basically no information is garnered from my deployment drops of my opponent. That's also using a what we call relatively balanced list. We have a cavalry option, we have a ranged option, we have some core infantry, a support infantry, and a solo. A mixture of basically all the components you can possibly have in this game, outside of enemy attachments who don't really count, that you can actually deploy. Okay? They don't really get many differentiations from that. So, how does this differ if we're running different style lists? Okay. Now, another common list we should probably look at is something like the Eldon 6. Eldon 6 is a very common list, so let's load that one up. We see in Eldon that we see, where is he? Eldon, typically in something. I'm going to go for Wardens. We do see him other stuff as well. We see the pickup of the double champions of the Stag. And we see the 3 NCUs. We see Courtney almost all the time. We see Baelish definitely all the time. And we'll go for Elena, not always the Elena pickup. But we do see Elena a lot. That leaves us with 6 points left. I'm going to go Thornwatch, sorry. Riders of Highgarden, also common pickup. I'm going to go Thornwatch in this instance. Okay. Eldon meta, call it that for now. I know people don't like the term meta, but it just lets me pick them up off the list. Oops. Be clever if I hit the right button. Michael, can't read since 2023. This is going to be an exam, yeah? Yes, Carl, this is an exam in all of your games in the future. So, let's reset this while we wait. So this is an Eldon 6 list. An Eldon 6 list is, as I say, does different variations. I'm going to go for the double cavalry Thornwatch. Your mileage may vary. So, again, I'm going to give you the warning with, this time, extra volume. Okay? Are you ready this time, guys? Are you super ready? Because you've been waiting for it. This is generalized rules. Like, you cannot take this for granted in every single game, in every single battle, terrain, everything. Opponent's army composition, the lack of range units, the inclusion of range units, the inclusion or lack of cavalry units, solos being a thing, solos not being a thing, weak units, NCUs, impact, offal versus not offal, for example. All of these things, this is a generalized set of rules. Your mileage may vary. Also, disclaimer, if you get any of this, if you do any of this and still lose, it's not my fault. Right. Anyway, Let's load this into the game. I'm not going to talk about this list in regards to playing against a Mance list. Superfluous, right? We've already had that conversation. Okay. So let's turn the game back on. That's what I want to do. So here we have the Elden list, and I'm going to run this into a. I said this was an Elden 6, isn't it? It's an Elden 7. I do apologise. Let's run this into. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll run it into a Martel, shall we? Let's go for a 7 Martel. Because we see 7 Martels all the time now. It's fairly, as we say, meta. So we've got. I don't actually have a Harmonello at 7. Rip. Didn't win with Harmer at 7. Says a lot. Harmon in his Spearman. We see Royal Guard. And I'll go for the single Flayed Man example. So I'll go for the Flayed Men, Royal Guard, skirms with a what do you call them? Captain? Spearlord? Spearlord. We'll go for Ilaria, we'll go for the Doran pickup as well, and we'll go for Baelish. So we'll save that. And we'll load this one in. So, a couple of things on this. If you haven't heard anyone talk about how to beat Doran, right? Talk about this guy first of all. Okay. Doran is a problem, right? And I don't mean a problem for balance. I mean a problem we have to think about. He is something that we need to consider. Doran tells me that I need to play the game fast. Okay? I want to present to my opponent as many options and to perhaps take Water Gardens to kind of force Doran plays to not happen in the way that I want them to, force on-field activations, all these problems. Now, thankfully, we're playing a game where I have Elena. Everybody say woo. Woo! So, with Elena, I don't have to worry about Doran. Ha ha ha! There's a reason I chose Baratheons, you see. This was pre-planned. So, with that in mind, I don't have to think about Doran, in which case this is an equal versus equal matchup. Terrain. Again, I'm not going to talk massively about terrain in terms of how we want to think about terrain, and it is game mode dependent. But Doran wants to play a semi-defensive kind of style with aggressive pieces that he can be defensive with while also projecting a lot of threat. He kind of does it all. Champions of the Stag are the ultimate defensive tanks in the game. You basically don't get much tankier than that, and you want to be walking around absolutely murking people. For those of you who are wondering, can you get tankier than Champions of the Stag? Yes, it's actually not that hard. People don't do it because it's bloody expensive. But Ironmakers with Carl 2-pointer in at 9 come in as a 2+, 3+ inside Asher Bubble. Tanky. Yeah, people don't run that, and yet people complain about Champions of Stag all the time. It's because they have, and they're 8 points, and they don't require a load of other stuff. There is a reason. It's better. Right, anyway. Yeah, so we have this. This is an equal versus equal activation count. There is nothing special going on here. Deployment will vary. Now, you can do one of two things. You can go for crazy kind of like split deployment in a kind of like I'm going to deploy some stuff over here, stuff over here. I think that's dumb. Don't do that. But you can do that. Alternatively, comes down to the terrain. Now, I will say terrain dependent. Terrain dependent. I know Ariakas pulled me out earlier for it. It is terrain dependent. The difference here is I don't know, unlike the Free Folk matchup or the 8 versus 10, right? Or a 9 versus 10 or a 7 versus 8 or a 6 versus 8. All of these things where I'm talking about on-field deployments being lower than my opponent's, thus I'm losing activations for it in the deployment phase, I already know in that Lannister versus Mance game that I have lost at the deployment phase. So I'm going in with the losing expectation. I have lost the deployment phase, so I can swing it. I can do things that make the game swingy. Because if I make it swingy, I might win the deployment phase. Okay? That is better than just losing it. Like, the last thing I want to see, if I see any more Lannister players going for something like this, corpse pile there, and then the free folk put like a weirwood here. I don't know. Let's put the corpse in the middle. Free folk player puts a weirwood here, and they go, "Oh, I know what to do. Corpse pile here." If I see any more Lannister players doing something like that, I'm gonna cry in against free folk, because this is the most garbage, like non-impactful terrain I've ever seen. Right? You haven't changed the deployment. You haven't forced the deployment into anything other than, oh, this is just an even game then, so I just deploy something really crummy up against the side of the board, and we just go from there. Now this is just a my list versus your list, and my list is better. My list is better. My commander is better. So none of that, please. In an even versus even, you can go for that. You can go for that because you don't want to risk the risk of losing the deployment phase. There's something a little bit akin to, oh look, we've got a relatively boring even board. I'm not going to sit here and say that's interesting. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that's good. But is this a reasonable thing that you might go for? Yes. I can understand this as a reasonable tactical choice rather than just being random choice. Okay? That being said, this is with two lists that are very similar. We've got one cav versus two cav. We've got one archer short range versus one archer short range. We've got two infantry versus one infantry. One of them's defensive, one of them's aggressive. This one's just defensive. Okay? With this in mind, what I would go for is, if you're winning deployment, you've got probably a defensive mindset in the way that you are thinking. So what you want to do is ensure that you get to the middle first. Ensuring you get to the middle first is difficult, but thoroughly possible with the double cav. Okay? 10 plus 4 plus 8 is 10 plus 12. That's 22. Right? You only actually need to get first turn, and you can take the middle objective regardless. Your opponent, 5 plus 10, 15 plus the 10 base, 25. He takes the middle objective with his flayed men 100% of the time if he chooses to. So, with that in mind, we have to contest the center objective. Now, I'm just talking about this in terms of a 5 objective game mode, but this is true of any other game modes where objectives score. It doesn't matter that it's wins. You know, the center objective is perhaps what you want to be defensive on. If you're playing a defensive list and you do not control this objective in a 5 or a 3 game mode, then you're playing a 3 and you've got both corners, in which case you're just going to get ganged up on, lose one flank, or you're not winning because you don't control the center. It is that simple. Now, what does controlling the center look like? That is enough. If you're defensive enough, that is controlling the center. Your opponent can't score it. Not scoring is the same as controlling it, exerting pressure, making your opponent not score victory points. Oh, but Michael, that's not the same at all. That's not the same at all, because if you're not controlling it, then you're not scoring victory points. Correct. You are slowing the pace of the game down. You are meaning that neither player scores the objective. Neither player scoring the objective means that the game is slower. That objective, for the all intents and purposes in terms of scoring, is not there. Suddenly you're playing a 4 or a 2 objective game mode. Now, in objectives where they move, so Dance with Dragons and things like that, you still want to take the center objective. It still puts you closer to the enemy in terms of being able to respond to their movements. However, if you've got 2, you're probably more likely to be backing off, to draw the enemy in, to come out of range, to make them have to invest resources to chase you down. That is a very common thing to do, to kind of like effectively grab and run. because it forces your opponent to make aggressive moves, and it forces them to make aggressive moves that can be potentially countered because they're having to come into range of other units if they want to capture or get to the unit that has the token. So just bear that one in mind. Okay. All right. So, okay. I would go something with this here. A lot of people tend to. I see a lot of people trying to doing this. They put like Eldon on the corner and they go, haha, he'll shore up the edge and then like something like this. You know, whatever. This is dumb. Like, this is really dumb. And I know you haven't seen the Martel deployment, but this is super dumb, right? Because these units aren't maneuverable, right? This is not a maneuverable unit. So even if you went for something like this, I'm still not liking this. This is not a good formation. I haven't even seen what the other person's got doing. I just objectively don't like this that much. Because what you're saying here, let's go to the higher, what you're saying here, maneuverable units, these have to make a push. This unit can't push. It's not an aggressive unit. It is a thoroughly defensive unit. That doesn't mean it can't do damage. It's just a defensive unit. It has no output on its own. This is a defensive unit, so it's going to hold. At best, over in the middle objective, we can still there, but it's slow. It might only be holding here. And this is a skirmishy type unit. It wants to flaunt. It wants to, it wants to be a bit of a pain on the flank here. But rip, now you're dead. Rip, Champions Stag can't get through that. Balls, Harmonizers again there to protect them. Balls, there's a skirmisher unit that can now take advantage of the double shot into Eldon, forcing him to make plays, or just prey on the Thornwatch and get into the flank. Double team this unit, ignore Eldon. Push, push. Attempt to hold these guys up. Push around. Kill, kill, kill. Oh god, you've got 2 units of Champion Stag left. You lost the other 2 units. You're losing the game. You're losing the board. Rip. How to lose with Baratheons in 1 easy step. So, if you're all with me so far, God, I've been going this for an hour and 9 minutes and people aren't bored. Holy shit. I'm bored of listening to me. Right, let's start again. Let's pretend that we're not bad players. Like Belisarius, who I know is watching. He's bad. He does this. That's a joke. He doesn't do this. He's still bad. Right. I love you, Kurt. What I would do, personally. This unit wants to control an objective, right? I am going to, like I said before with the Guardsman, I'm just going to deploy opposite an objective that I want. It's a defensive unit. I want to push it up the board. I want to control a token with it because it forces the defensive tech like Hardened, like Counter-Strike. It forces this thing to come into play. If this unit is over here, doing nothing, and the rest of the fight is happening over here, then I've now got a 5-point unit with a 1.5 to 2 point attachment value commander in there doing literally jack shit. I might as well be playing with a 35 to 33 point list. That's the way I see it. Honestly, that's the way I see it. And I know this is a separate thing, right? And people, again, might not like this. These abilities here, not so much these. These don't really care about, right? These are nice and all. They're great and all. Don't care. When I'm buying a unit, I care about the stats. Okay? I care about these stats here. Okay? But in gameplay, I know why I bought the unit, because they're well statted or not statted well. If I want to win, it's about getting the most use out of these things. Now, the most use doesn't actually mean using it the most, right? There's actually a little bit of a misnomer. The Swift Strike on Thornwatch. That means I just want to retreat all the time because of regroup. No. What you want to do, sometimes using it is not using it, right? It's projecting the threat of using it. For example, come at me, bro. Come at me, bro. Oh, yeah, we'll get this guy easy. We'll get this guy easy. Smack. Oh, no. We're nearly dead. Lol. Oh, we'll get him again, guys. Boink. Oh no, we're nearly dead. Lol. Guys, we can do it again. Lol. You see the point, right? You are getting value out of regroup because he's forcing him to come into you. Now, yes, sometimes Royal Guard, when they get the battle endurance coming down, that's not going to be the case, right? It's not as simple as that. You can't just loll away. You might die. But, point in case, you are going to be getting value out of that by dint of not using Swift Strike necessarily. But because you've got the Sundering, because you've got the short range, you can tie something up. That unit, that was turn 4 through to that was turn 3 to turn 5 in those 3 attacks, and we didn't roll any attack dice. We completely metriced it out, and that's not at all how a game would go. But that was, that Sunspear Royal Guard not doing anything for 5 rounds. Oh, but I nearly killed. No, you didn't do anything. You didn't actually do anything productive. Not alone. Now, could we argue that that Swansea Royal Guard had pushed here and that meant more flanking opportunities? Yeah, it did mean it unlocked the option for further things. The Martel player is still unlocking that. The Swansea Royal Guard are achieving the unlockment of the position, but they are not achieving a winning condition from the position. Think of it like chess. Taking a pawn in front of your opponent's king is really good because it leaves him unprotected. If you sacrificed all of your pieces to do that, the other player doesn't care because you've got nothing to take advantage of the hole that you've created. You can say, look, I've made an objectively good play. And then there's that moment. What did it cost you? Everything. Yeah. Thanos meme. If it costs you everything, then it wasn't worth it. You've lost. Right? You need to have resources kept back. You need to have ways of capitalizing. And this is where using abilities matters. Because you can get mileage out of stats. Stats are good or bad. Right? We know that. We know good stats when we see them. Hey! Boing, 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 boing. We know okay stats to mediocre stats. And we know balls to the wall amazing stats. On that note, just a quick note, why are flayed men so good? That part of their profile, yeah, it's alright. That part of their profile, every time you attack, every time that someone attacks into you, every time that this thing is involved in the game, these keywords, all of these abilities do something. Part of the reason why these guys are good. Basically every round, these abilities do something. These abilities basically do something. These abilities have impact. Let's have a look at a unit that is widely regarded as a bit poo-poo. Let's load up... Oh yeah, we're coming for you, Lannisters. We're coming. Anyone who wants to take a guess, by the way, in the chat at this point now, which unit we're going to look at. I will not be taking bets, but it will be good for chat to realise which unit we're going to be looking at. And if you'd said in 3, 2, 1... it was Castle Rock Honor Guard, you'd be right. They're not so bad. This is garbage. This is not something we basically, not because we can't use it, because the ability never is used. It's a melee only ability that requires tokens. We've just added 2 hoops to jump through. This ability is bad, not because of the effect. I might use this once in the game and it could be a good ability and that's fine. But the simple fact of the matter is that my chance of using the ability is low. Yeah? All of these, quite nice, right? This, domineering pride. When engaged by enemies with fewer ranges, just automatically passes all panic tests. In what world is an opponent got less ranks than a unit of goddamn Lannisport City Watch? Unless you're fighting monsters. Don't do that. Don't use monsters against Lannisport City Watch. Has anyone ever run Lannisport City Watch? Who plays Lannisport City Watch? Let's throw them over there. Oops. Come here. Right, they're going with the King's Guard. Screw them. Right. It's an ability that simply doesn't get much value out of. And Mountains Men. Mountains Men. Everyone in chat saying Mountains Men. Should we have some hate for Mountains Men? Where are they? Hi, Mountains Men. Marauder's Blades. Ooh, quite like. I like that. Prey on Fear. Garbage. Right, cool. Anyway, that's where we sit with there. So deployment. What we're going to do? Well, as I said, Eldon in the center. It makes the use out of the abilities he has. If I'm deploying first. If he's deploying first, the chances are he'll put something like the Sunspell Royal Guard in the middle. Or he might deploy the Flayed Men in the middle. We talked about why Flayed Men in the middle is a good deployment drop in nearly all games. Because of the maneuverability, it can go over here, it can go over here. But, quiz question number 1. What does Flayed Men in the middle here tell us about his deployment? There's a question. We forget Honor Guard even exist. It should be Vicious Space at least. Yeah, it should. I agree. I used them once, said Zeodicus. Good on you, Zeodicus. I really hope that they did you well, and I hope you won that game. So, the thing is, if he deploys his Flayed Men here, it kind of betrays one of 3 options. Now, I know, 3 options. That's a lot of options, Mickey. He either... Now, this could be replicated left or right. I'm only going to show it for one side, because realistically the option is there. It either means, because he's probably going to want to deploy his Sunspear Royal Guard near the center. He definitely wants to deploy his Ulla near his Sunspear Royal Guard to push them 3 forward, to give them extra. And it's really the skirmishers become his only kind of like interesting drop. Right? There are no dead drops in this combination, remember. So really, it could be here. These 2 units could be swapped around. It could be one here, one maybe here, right? As the 3rd variant for, but he's not doing much more than this. And if this unit comes over here, it's shackled to Harmon now. You know, it's if it wants to be inside the 12, it has to kind of stay there, or Harmon has to come in a bit, and this guy can't come across to the side as much to get the healing. Like, I'm not saying it's perfect, but this Flayed Men in the middle option from the Martel player betrays a piece of information. Right? Likely to be at the end of the line, or center of a line, or end of line. So those are the 3 options we've got, which is actually kind of enough information for us to go further, right? Because he knows what? Well, actually, these 3 units, like, they don't really give a shit where Eldon's deployed. Like, this unit definitely doesn't. It can go over here with these 2 units over here. I could have one there, one there, one there. These are all relatively independent units. So as a result, I could go something like this. And that's not at all what the Martel player was perhaps expecting. I could go for this. And make a Juggernaut style gameplay with the dropping the Thorn Watch on either side. Oops, clearing the board. Something like that. Okay? There is no real piece of information that I'm revealing. Now, why is it different for Martels? Well, this is because, as I said, right, and I am going to point this out to you. I really do need to point this out to you again, okay? Your mileage may vary. It is entirely dependent on your opponent's lists, your opponent's abilities, the terrain, the game mode. All of these things matter. But within an analysis of the lists, you can tell all this information. So do that. It will tell you how they might deploy. Okay? So, let's say the Martel player deploy first and they go for the House Swap and Flayed Men there, or I deploy first with the Eldon here, right? They respond with the other. Now, if I'm deploying next, I'm going to go for Champions of the Stag unit. I'm going to go for Champions Stag unit, probably a couple of inches off on one side. I don't really care which side. Neither of those 2 options matter, because I've got 2 identical units, right? This deployment drop doesn't really tell me anything about this deployment drop, and if we look at the units left to deploy, there is still variation. Think of it like wanting to leave variation and options until the last possible moment. We can stack these units on top of each other because they're the same. So we just take which of these 3. We could deploy this one first, The problem is, deploying this one here, you're like, oh, where's he going to deploy Eldon? And if you deploy Eldon over on our side objective, what's he doing? He has no impact on the board. Like we said, movement 4 object. He ain't. No, movement 4 non-cav. He ain't playing a part on this side of the board anymore. This is a dumb deployment, like I said with the guardsman. I might deploy him here. Yeah, I might. Still not a good deployment. I wouldn't consider this a good flank unit. It's not using the best of its abilities, really. Get him in the middle. Right? Get him stuck in the middle. So as a result, your next drop is going to be Champions of the Stag, because it's the least impactful in your own list building. Now, the problem is with the Martel list, in comparison, this is a good unit. Yeah, this is a good unit. This is also a good unit. Let's stack them on top of each other. This is a goddamn good unit, but it's different. It's an archer unit. It has difference it's good at. And this is your support unit. It's kind of defensive. But if Wardens charge this, the Wardens don't really care. Especially with Elden Wardens. They just chew this to bits. So, hang on. My opponent has to deploy one of these, unless he wants to deploy Ulla in the middle. And like we said, Eldon into Ulla. Eldon's a happy boy. Charging, intercept for charge on those guys with no rerolls, everything else like that. Oh, but battle endurance, yeah, sod it. You're trying to get involved before battle endurance makes a big play. You know, you're not losing that fight. You're not winning it necessarily, but you're not losing it. It's a fight you're willing to take. And good luck setting for charge something with Counter-Strike with no rerolls. So, this is the problem. He doesn't really want to deploy his Ulla list first, because it needs to be within 12 inches of everything. And if he does deploy it in the middle, it's a deceptively weak center. You know, this is a killable unit, certainly from Champions of the Stag. This is very killable. So, if he deploys this here against your Eldon, I'm already feeling pretty good about my life. It is the least information, because he has the 12-inch range now covering all the way up to basically the side tokens. But I'm still a happy boy, because I'm going to win the center. To the point where my response will just be, bloop. Okay, I'll win the center. What's he going to do? He sees the Champions of Stag. He knows there's 2 units coming, and he's like, oh, God. I need to shore up this flank against the Champions of Stag. So I'll put my Flame Men there, or I'll put my Sons of Royal Guard there to shore up that flank of the center. And I go, cool. I'll go this side then. And he goes, oh, crap. Well, I'll have to put the other defensive unit on that side. Cool. And now I get to pick with a Thorn Watch. Which side do I want to pick on? This side. And he goes, alright, okay, so I'll put the Sand Skirmishers here. What does this mean? Well, actually, exactly what we wanted. This unit matches this unit. This unit might push forward, matches this unit. And this unit matches this unit. And these guys have a weird skirmish off. Now, the skirmishers probably beat the Thornwatch, they're a much more expensive unit. But Eldon probably beats this unit. Not necessarily killing it, but push it back. And these grinds depend a lot on dice, right? But this is actually the point. The game is now a stat game, with Champions of the Stag as 2 of the most well-statted units in the game. You've turned the game into a grind. And Baratheons want that. The game is slow, the game is ponderous. And if he doesn't do something... Cool. Cheers, bro. Dead. Reposition. Come forward. Happy days. Martels are looking sad. Martels are looking real sad. Right? So he has to do something. And charge blocking and lowering the amount of combats is all possible, you know. They're all possible opportunities. But this is the thing. You can run an almost vanguard lineup to then just go all in, down middle. Rush B. And if your opponent tries to play clever, you push further in. Because if this unit's dead, this unit come and sit over here. And the idea bump, bump, bump. Something a bit like this. Into bang. Oh, but he just charged me in the rear. Yeah, he will. But he loses his unit in the center first. Charging in the front now. Or that cavalry charge killed him. Unlikely. It's unlikely that you'll kill these guys in one shot. We know this from UUU and other things. Just unlikely you get the crit damage and stuff. Which is why you don't be afraid to charge them with the frontal unit in the first place. You can start making headway, and all of a sudden this unit's like, oh crap, we should probably get in a fight, otherwise we're going to lose those 2 units. Right? Cheers, bro. Yeah. Gameplay, I mean, this. I can't promise this is how dice work. I can't promise you this is how things will go down into a game. Like, I can't map out any of that stuff, right? But this is the way that I would think about it. And there are, there are units matchups that you lose in this. These guys will probably lose to Flayed Men slightly. They don't really lose to the Sound Skirmishers. The Sound Skirmishers do beat the Thornwatch pretty heavily. The Thornwatch can get beaten pretty heavily by the Sons of Royal Guard and the Flayed Men. None of these matchups are nice, particularly. You really don't care about this matchup, by the way. This is a pretty tasty matchup for you, because you go in and go, oh no, I've taken some wounds. Like, you do your Swift Strike attack back off, you heal some back up, and he'd probably taken a bunch of wounds. And it's like, oh, but that was a free, and then he can charge you and things like that. But like, you're not losing that fight really. That's an interesting fight. You are a point more, okay, commander attachments and stuff. So that's an interesting one over there. But this is the thing: these units can just about beat. This doesn't really beat anything in terms of like damage output, but it will stand up against a lot of these, except maybe the Royal Guard. Just the simple Royal Guard is that they generate so many hits, and with the natives vulnerable plus the sunderings they get from cards, it starts to get more difficult. But anyway, yes, 7 activations. Less drawing on the map this time. I've done it with the units. 7 activations. Deploy your slower, harder to maneuver but less telegraphed objects. Don't telegraph slow movement objects early with side plays. This is bad. This is bad. Please, if there's one takeaway, side object being slow, deployed on flank, bad. Good. Good. And just so you know what else constitutes like the level of good to bad. If you deploy like this is bloody terrible. And I would question your life. Do not do this. This is a very short way to lose a game. If anyone does this and wins a game with this deployment, with an infantry unit, please tell me. Because this might not... this isn't a thing. Okay? If I see people doing this and this, I will physically throw onions at your board when I next see you play in person. I will take some onions as a humble onion, a smuggler, throwback, and throw onions at your board. I hate you for even making me think that you would do this. Do not do this. I told you don't do this. Some of you are thinking about it. I know Carl is going to deliberately do this and take a photo of it now. Don't do this, Carl. I know you're leaving. You're trying to like sell off some stock and like trying to cut down your armies. Do not do this. Melkor says you deploy Mormont Bruisers to the shelf to make them good. Actually, you can deploy Mormont Bruisers like this, and they would probably be more effective. Game over, man. Game over. Yeah, there's no way you've won games like this, Mark. If it's catapults and stuff, that doesn't count. Catapults and scorpions don't count. Right? And cavalry doesn't really count because you can just be memeing. If you're deploying infantry like this, no. No. Anyway. There there. And this is not optimal necessarily. You know, I will make sure I add this point again because just to really reinforce this, I don't think people have had it enough. Your mileage may vary. Okay, remember that. And also, my deployment tips can't help you if you're very bad at deploying terrain and then deploy using. I'll show you. If you deploy terrain like this, like a palisade there, let's make it just over 5 inches away from deployment zone line. So yeah, 5.5, perfect. Something like that. Makes you move a bit closer up. If you deploy like this, where you can't just move from the horses and then kill it with swords, right? Because it's not easy for a march, because you might have to twist like horribly like that in order to get within an inch. If you're deploying like this terrain, I can't help you. Okay, your actions may be kind of dumb. I can't help you with that scenario. I'm not saying this is bad, but if you're going to do it, at least make it something where you can at least go, haha, horses, into haha, destroy with swords, haha, march. Okay, just bear that one in mind, right? At least with these, you know, bring them 4 inches forward so you can go 4 inches, destroy with them, haha, activated, move forward. Mileage may vary. Right. So yes, that's generally kind of like going back to the non-meme level. Am I ever not a meme? This is the kind of deployment I would like to think about, the kind of way to think about the game, and the way that you need to think about it. You can make certain areas of the boards more kind of like inviting for your opponent to want to fight near. So let's go for something like this, and then we'll go for impacting like this here, and then let's have something like a bog's a pretty good one to deploy against. So you can have something a bit like this. Now this indicates to me quite a very natural line to draw off the back of this, and I would draw that kind of line there, with the Baratheons being on this side, the Martells being on the other side in red. Something like that would be the kind of like gameplay I would expect. As a result, you might even bring the Thornwatch further over here to be more aggressive with this kind of terrain setup rather than this flank. That's your choice depending on the matchups, depending on if you're choosing edges or not. Vice versa, if you're coming from this way, you're probably thinking something very similar. I know that Drogon Ross watching will know what this looks like with a 4 activation Martell list, something a little bit like this. Is very similar to a way I played against, actually more like this. Not these exact units, but it was a 7 activation Martell list against a 7 activation Martell list, and it looked something a little bit like that. And it ended up playing very much like, oh, I can take advantage of this hole, and then it ended up being crunch, crunch. Okay, that hole you took advantage of didn't work. Sound skirmishes are very good for that. So yeah, something like that as well is not a terrible option, depending on what you are looking to try to achieve. Yeah, you know, it really is up to you how the list plays out. Part of kind of like the discussion of where all this kind of stems from is that a lot of players will ask about deployment. A lot of players will discuss kind of what deployment means and what it should look like. And the problem is there isn't really good rules to follow. And I know I've just done a whole episode on generalized good rules to follow, but they are generalized. They aren't perfect. They aren't the best rules in the world for your given scenario, your given game. List composition matters, like a lot. Good list composition. This is actually where we talk about good list composition. Because good list composition allows good terrain deployment phase. It allows deployment phase well. It means that the execution of the list is simple once the game starts. Yeah? If this is another unit of cavalry, for example, which is I know people do a lot with the Riders of Highgarden, then as the Martell player, those woods and things that I might be less inclined to take because of my own units, well, hang on, woods give me the +1 against these charges. That's not terrible. They don't stop my own line of sights. That's not terrible, because I can dance around with this. They don't stop palisade play, which I know cavalry play around well with palisades, but so do archers. Archers love a good palisade blocking charge blocks and stuff. Corpse piles to remove rerolls and bulk piles to remove rerolls and movement. All of these things start to enter the play zone as active terrain pieces that are going to be beneficial, right? Whereas if that's a archer unit, it's like, oh god, that corpse pile doesn't do anything if they just sit there and shoot. Oh wait, hang on, that palisade is a bad option if it just sits there. Okay, 1-inch shifting rather than 2-inch shifting, it makes them slower, that's cool. There's options again, okay? It unlocks different terrain options and allows different deployment options and different play patterns, leaving swords unlocked because they haven't got, you're not Starks, you're not an assault orders faction of swords, you don't have a ranged unit. I couldn't care less if I leave swords open in the early part of the round, for example. So, all of those things and more, something that you might like to listen to. Our local hero, what about outflanking? I hate outflank. Outflank is bad. Don't do outflank. Please. No. Okay. So, outflank. Outflank I am going to talk about. And I know outflank is bad. Right? But I've seen people take advantage of outflank and it can wreck people. One thing against an outflank that you have to realise is an outflank is going to have to come on over here or over here. I know that everyone knows that from outflank, but this actually informs an important decision making. So it is useful. If you've got, and this is actually very important with the setups and everything that we've decided, if your opponent has an outflank, a setup like this is not terrible. A setup like this is infinitely better. Right? Because you now have response. He outflanks by taking the horses. Cool. I'll just turn and fucking charge him. Where this doesn't work is where you see lists like this. Right? Let's say this is BBG or something like that. Outflank here. Oh, bugger. I suppose I better go over here then. Oh god, I need to get rid of that unit quickly. Oh god, what should we do, guys? What should we do? We need to get rid of that unit quickly over there. There's a battle on over here. Right over here. Let's help him. Do you think they've got it, guys? On the left flank. Do you think that these guys on the right flank have got it? Do you think they've got it? I don't know, but we're gonna have to shore up the flank of these guys, so we're coming over here. Oh bollocks! There's our friends. I'm not going forward without them, so I suppose I'll come to here. And all of a sudden, this blue line that we established earlier, use this red line to indicate the changed one. What did you just lose? Top marks for anyone who knows what they've just lost. Put the blue one back in, which was going to be about there. That's very thin. Bit rubbish, isn't it? And the red one. Yeah. The difference, outflank has led to a 8-inch reduction in board control. It'd be a bit more aggressive over here and over here. Maybe it's only going to be 6 inches of board control. The difference being is that 6-inch board control and the matchups we've got means that I now control more space on the board. Literally, the board space and the middle point, as Zeodicus says in chat, has been lost, and the board space for the Martel player is a lot better. I play my game by looking at the space player control. Martel indirectly control all of this space. Now, they haven't got anything back here, but at this moment, nothing is threatening here. There is no threat back here. Nothing can do anything to the rear of these units. This is controlled space by the Martel player indirectly. No threat themselves, but it is controlled. Passively controlled. They also control this space here. Slightly passively. They don't really control the space here. This is neutral ground, to be honest. It's not that much of a threat, but you've got the skirmishers on the flanks, so they project a threat. And then you've got threat projection here in the frontal area, and then obviously into the blue zone here. Blue, and using the same logic, blue controls this space here indirectly. They control all this space here. They have threat here. They have threat here. And then they have threat here, cavalry. Okay? Point is, the controlled space, there's simply less blue than there is red. And that's just not because I've drawn less, right? If I do this, more blue, right? But the amount of space that blue takes up is less. There's significantly more space in the red. And that's indirectly winning a game. Not all cases, not all game modes. It's indirectly. Now, are there scenarios where this doesn't work? Are there places where this isn't really true? Yeah, I mean, Fire and Blood, obviously, Here We Stand, all these kind of things do have a matter, but if Here We Stand, this would be an effective way of controlling potentially 3 objectives, rather than just the 1. In a 3-objective game mode, it would allow the collection of this objective and the middle, meaning a 2 versus 1, similarly with Clash of Kings, and in a 5-lane objective, you might be able to push in this here, and all of a sudden you're scoring 2 to 1. And these are horrifically out of position to score anything of any note. Paul says, got it, draw more blue to win. Yeah, draw more blue. Draw more blue. Draw more. No. It's a general rule, like that's, again, these are generalized rules. These will not work, but this is kind of like to picture a game. And I don't know if every good player does this. It's something that I do, but I kind of find it very hard to explain. So this is kind of where I'll finish off. And when I say picturing a game, right? And hopefully I will show you what this would look like in the future. And by that I mean, I might picture where round 2, round 3, round 4 will end. And there's always a very instructive moment I remember using against Brett, right? This was back in 1.6, right? And I pictured the game and I said to Brett before the game, there's a line. Right? I don't know why it's been so thin and rubbish. It's just going to stand out. Should we go for a bright yellow? That should stand out, shouldn't it? Oh my god, that's even worse. Right. There we go. I said to Brett, that's the line. Okay? You are going to deploy, and this is the line you're going to have. This is Harmer versus Dark Days. And I'm going to control this area, this side of the line. You aren't going to, at any point during this game, really significantly enter this part of the board. Okay? I can't remember who won that game. I think Brett may have won it. No, I won it, but it was close. It was a close game. Back in the days of 1.6, Stark versus Free Folk was a close one. Starks had the upper edge, but it was a close one. It was against his Starksworn sword spam style list. And his units, at the end of the game, not that many things were dead, but they were nearly all like this. And back in the day of, this is in Signif span days, so there was billions of units. And again, Free Folk. But back then they weren't as oppressive as they are now compared to everything else. Because that was my game plan setting out, and the amount of pressure that I could exert in different areas, I understood my list. I understood what I could get away with and what I couldn't. I knew that pushing him back here was just unlikely, but also not required. I wasn't going to win the game by pushing him back here unless he's all dead. If he's all dead, I've won anyway, so who cares? But I didn't expect that. I expected this kind of outcome, and it almost happened perfectly. Now, when you do visualize these things, when you understand two lists and their matchups, there are things that can throw this away, right? Good or bad die rolls, they can ruin everything, right? Out activation allows this much better than equal activations, but that's what you should be looking to do. Look for how does this game reach a board state that I am enjoying, and what does that board state look like? And then really all you're doing is attempting to manifest that board state, but also do it within reasonable expectations. I'm not expecting to kill champions of the stag super easy. So why try to kill them? Why try to think about them being dead? I'd much rather think about them being alive, but being held up. Oh, they're married now. That's expectation versus reality versus execution, which we'll talk about in a later game when we'll probably do a recorded game with that kind of style of thinking gone into it. Again, mileage may vary. It's not going to happen every single time. It won't. It doesn't. But a lot of what we call like high level games, a lot of players see it as quite predictable. So just bear that one in mind. Okie dokie. That is an hour and 48 minutes of me chatting garbage on deployment and terrain. I have gone on far too long. I have I've baked my own brain here. Carl says I can't wait for this to translate into English. If anyone has been following me along for 1.5 hours without falling asleep, without going insane themselves, without finding it really hard to follow, well done. For you, I have to say this. You're amazing. You keep doing what you're doing. You're great. So yeah, anyway, let's cycle back down now into our final section of today. Madness. We are going to look at some events, and specifically, let's have a little look at the team event. Team event stats are open. We have no games have been played, obviously, but we have Kevin as the most picked up commander, beating out Mance. 22% in Lannister. The Mance pick rate is nuts, given 14% of the field pick Free Folk, which is what you'd expect. Mance obviously coming in again, just far too many Mance pickups. Rip. Remember, this is a game without Varamir, so the game is a bit more balanced with no Varamir. And it also takes away the commander option, unfortunately. But we see a good mix of factions there. It is team tournament with different factions, so Night's Watch, Free Folk, Stark, Targ, all healthy on kind of like respectable 13%. Great. 19% Baratheon. I mean, it's good to see a bit of a resurgence in Baratheon. The most interesting thing for Baratheon being that they've got quite a big split of commanders. You only see no standout commanders near the top. You're actually seeing a lot of Rightful Heir, you're seeing Eldon Estamont, you're seeing Axel, you're seeing Renly, you're seeing Stannis again, 1-2 King, you're seeing Courtney, a couple of Loruses, and that's about it. But you're seeing a good mix of those commanders, a really good kind of variation in the commander pickup there, which is good to see. That's positive. It is actually not John, but Cotter Pike who wins out the Night's Watch, which is an odd one. We don't often see Cotter overstating Jon Snow's popularity, but it has happened. So that's interesting to see. No surprises to anybody to see Eddard and Great John as the two pickups from Starks, with basically no one else of note being picked. One-offs with a couple of other commanders, including one Outrider commander. Bannisters being then the top dogs there, taking up Kevin and Adam. Kevin Adam has been like the meta combination for a lot of time now in terms of where people think it's. A couple of Tyrions in there and Rooses. I think Tyrion's still very good. Roose is perfectly fine, of course. Then we got a real mix. We got basically all of the team being picked up there: Tywin, Jaime, Gregor, Joffrey, and the High Sparrow, all with one entry. What we do see is a Belwas and other dragons. let's see that Mother Dragons do really well. But it is, of course, predominantly Drogo, with Grey Worm and Queen of Marine coming in at second. No Marslan, I believe, and no Shazdak released. No Targ Hero 3, so those were not available for pickups. What is disappointing is this 6% here for Greyjoys. It would appear that Greyjoy kind of like Greyjoy sympathies have waned and waxed. They are no longer a pickup choice. We see no Ash. We see some Asher, sorry, at 3. We see a couple of Eurons and Dagmars, and we see a Victarion. No, Baelor. Oh, pardon me. Sorry. We see a Baelor pickup, so no Victarion pickups. Obviously being used as a 3-point attachment, most likely. But very, very lackluster on the Greyjoy front. It's a bit of a shame. Obviously, I know that Mikkel isn't playing in the event, but it's a shame that like Greyjoys really just haven't got the popularity, and being a worse faction, I think that people basically looked at the top 4 or 5, Free Folk Night's Watch, Martell aren't out, so Free Folk Night's Watch, Baratheon, Lannister, Stark, and then leaning into Drogo, kind of made sense from tournament like team pickups. But yeah, the Stark pickups is kind of people will always play Starks because they're Starks and they're the good guys, and they're also in the start boxes. But Greyjoys being a low pickup is sad. No neutrals, which doesn't surprise me for a team tournament really. I don't know of any major Spanish players playing neutrals as well, unlike the US, which has got notable players playing neutrals, and the UK has got a couple of neutral mainers in the likes of Tom Tyler. Victor says, I'm in as Mikkel's Bannerman. Cool, good. Victor, are you playing? Where are you? No. Are you playing Greyjoys? There's the question. There is Farlane. Yes, he is. Yeah. Good man, Victor. Good man. I wish you many, many wins. So yeah, that's that. No Martells, obviously, so no entries in the Martell category there because they're not released in Spain. So yeah, I really hope that one pans out well. I might do a little bit of a prediction thing on which team I think is going to win if I have time to have a little look at the proper full lists. But it is interesting to see Miguel Lafuente, who is one of the stronger players in Spain, one of the Spanish winners. He went looking at Free Folk, and he's gone for a kind of traditional Free Folk pairing, but he's gone for Harmer in his second list with Mag Harmer. So we'll see how that one turns out. He's got a Night's Watch Cotter Pike and John player with him, and we're also looking at Templo. We're also looking at a Baratheon Rightful Heir Eldon. This is looking like a pretty standard Rightful Heir. No Mel in the Rightful Heir. Bit of a counter to what we maybe see elsewhere. So a non-Mel Baratheon. And we've got a Lannister running Roose and High Sparrow. Mixing up a little bit. Roose Blackguard, Flameman. Yeah, okay. So a standard 7-ish into a double 7 from the Lannister player. Okay, so yeah, he's got an interesting team there. We'll see how Lafuente and his team, the Templo Wargamers, do. Victor, obviously playing his Greyjoys. He's got an interesting team, I assume. I actually don't know what team he's on, so let's have a double check. Victor Martinez, Last Warcry. So we've got Victor playing his Greyjoys. We've got Stark, Diego Stark. Fair. Diego's been getting a lot of games in online. Diego's a pretty good player. So Diego picking up his Starks there with Great John and Eddard. We've got none up there. We've got Sherhander with Adam Marbrand, Kevin List. Okay, so he's gone the more traditional route. He's gone for the triple Warris, Sun Gregor, and the... Okay, he's gone for the double Guardsman Knight Sargastic Rock build on the 8, but very similar to the 8 activation we were looking at earlier. So it's interesting from Sherhander. Slightly off meta with the slightly lower pace of what I call the Kevin list, but the Adam list is on point. Pretty strong options there, and we see... I think that's meant to be the Last Warcry, isn't it? The Last Warcry is capitalized there, but yeah, last one is Mr. One, who I do know is a quite a highly rated Spanish player. Plays a lot with Mikel, I believe, and is playing his Mance lists. He's gone for the old Harmer 9 or Mance with Harmer 9 and of a Torment with Mag. I like this list. This is a list I enjoy. It's a bit more of a fun list. Cool. Yeah. Well, obviously, good luck to everybody involved. If I haven't read out your list, I do apologise. But those are just players I happen to know. 64 players in the end, so they did get the full complement of teams, which is fantastic. I really hope to look forward to that, and that will be on stream. As another note, there has now been confirmation from basically Chris and Stovetop Stefan that they have got partnership with Frontline Gaming. And what does partnership with Frontline Gaming mean? It means that LVO will be streamed this weekend. Okay, LVO streamed this weekend. Do watch it out for that as well. It'll be coming from the Sunday Slaughter Discord channel, Twitch channel. I will, of course, be sharing that closer to the weekend when the games are played to keep you guys informed and up to date with all of LVO. Really hope LVO goes well, guys. Good luck to Stefan, to Chris, to Craig, all the other players going out there. I really hope that it's an enjoyable time, like first and foremost, more so than wishing anyone luck. I can't wish anyone luck because there's a lot of people going that I know, and if I wish one of them luck, then I have to wish them all luck, and only one of them will win, and then I'm picking favourites, and oh my god. Plus I don't know any of the lists, so I'm not going to do any of that, and just say good luck to all of them. Chris, Stefan, Craig, I think Luke might be going. If Luke is, obviously good lucks to Luke. Any of the other players that I know that are going. Have a great time. Imperial Minis LVS stream tailgate in my driveway. Pre-game barbecue, yes. And on a note, I did say to Willy Bugs that I'd show off Captain Con. So in 2 weeks' time, it is Captain Con in Richmond, USA. They've got a 30-player event on the Friday. I do believe they've got players already signed up for this. There are more than that, he was telling me. So the Friday ELO, do check that out. We've got the Saturday, the Not Today tournament, the one-day tournament on the Saturday. Do check that one out. That's going to be kind of like, I think, one of the main events. You see a lot more players already signed up for that one. And then there's the Sunday Fear Cups Deeper Than a Sword, which I believe is a 3-round event happening on the Sunday. And again, players are already signed up and involved with that one. Do check these out, guys. Do get yourself playing. And if you're nearby the Richmond area, do tag along. I expect Captain Con to be a good time, and they've used the site often, and they do have the Song Ice and Fire event going on every year. So do go along and support that if you're nearby. Paul, I'm playing Magic the Gathering. It's my 9-year-old tomorrow. Can you wish me luck? No, Paul, because I feel like you should win, but also it's you, Paul, so you'll almost definitely lose. So yeah, good luck, Paul. But I'm sorry for your loss, because you're going to lose. Nah, you'll be fine. It won't be that bad. Bragging rights to your 9-year-old kid every day. Right, on that note, that is it for this week. I do thank you all for tuning in. We will have a very quick reminder of the upcoming tournaments of the week. So we've got an event happening this Wednesday in Poznan in Poland. We've got an event happening in Zaragoza in Spain. We have LVO. In case you forgot, check out Sunday Slaughter streams. We've got First of His Name in Malta happening this weekend as well. That's number 4. The team tournament happening in Zaragoza, as well as the ELO event in Spain. Massive players there. Do check the streams or check out information. I will be following along with that one. Definitely check that out. Happening in Spain this weekend. Number 5. We have got another event in Poland, in Warsaw. Another small event there. I hope that one goes well. Number 6. At number 7, we've got an event in Russia. At number 8, we've got Gardon of Throne, an event in Gardon, France. I really hope that one goes well. And a small event in Top Tables in Cologne. Now, a couple of players who watch the show are going to be in Cologne, including Killax and LM Song of Ice and Fire, probably with neutrals. Really hope that one really goes well, LM. I know that you watch. Get together there. We've got at number 7, I think now, the Ontario, Canada, the Black Knight Gaming event happening in Ontario, Canada this weekend as well. We also have an event in Mexico. Yeah, Mexico. It's a new place for me to see on the list. I don't think we've seen a Mexican event before, and that's El Novo Reino, the Batalla del Castillo Negro, Battle of the Black Castle, Black Keep, Battle at Castle Black, probably, happening in the CDMX in Mexico. Someone else will know what that means. I do not. Oh, Ciudad de Mexico, the city of Mexico. Duh. Right. And the Realm Games and Comics in East Imperial Highway in California. Another event in Cali. Great to see. An event happening in Florida, in St. Petersburg in Florida, US. Awesome. An event happening in Denmark. Yes, Denmark. Get in there, Denmark. I hope that their events have been going well, and I hope that one goes well too. The Dreadfort Open happening in Helsinki in Finland. Fantastic event there. We've got a couple more. We've got another event happening in Mexico State, in the state of Mexico. An event happening this weekend as well. Mexico really bringing up the I can't translate this one. Sorry, Imperial. Really bringing up the route here, and we see another one in Mexico as well on Sunday. That's at One-Toller Games in Mexico. Wow, Mexico. Where's this come from? I'm loving it. Keep this up. And then we also have, rounding us off, a couple. Well, please, even more. An Assault of Ice and Fire happening in British Columbia, Canada, and another event in Gdansk, Poland. There is also an online event happening, another ELO online event run by Tom. Tom Winter is coming. Tyler, online event. He's put it at 10,000 players. There aren't that many players that are going to play, but it's going to run basically for like 4 or 5 weeks until the patch drops. That's his theory. I certainly don't think that the March time limit is going to see a patch drop, but we will see. That was a lot more than I thought it was going to be, and I started counting them and I stopped because I gave up because I'd forgotten. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 events happening this weekend. 19. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Watching me count live on stream is the most engaging gameplay you've ever seen. 19 events happening this weekend. 19! That's nuts. LVO, we know, is going to be like 60 people, we're hoping. 64 people for the team event. Then a bunch of like sitting at like 10. Let's say 10 of them are 10, right? I know they're not, but roughly speaking, after averages, 10 of them are 10. That's 120, 220 players playing events this weekend. That's not all of the events. There'll be more than that. I think conservatively, I can say 250 players are going to be playing on the site this weekend, submitting games, playing events. I think it's going to be an amazing weekend for Assault on Ice and Fire. LVO, team event, into Captain Con next weekend. I really hope everyone has a great weekend. I really wish you good luck in your games, and I will see you in the future. See you later.
Ready? Aim!
There's too many!
Anyone see my mammoth?
Stubby!